Hi YouTube, welcome to another edition of Horror Hands, and for this video we're on episode 5 of our looking through the decades of horror, and this time we're on the 1990s. Now I did say previously the 1980s is my favourite decade, which it is for content, but I've got to say the 1990s is probably my favourite decade in general. That's the decade I was a kid, I was growing up. We still had some great movies, some great music. Wrestling was the best it's ever been, and it's often looked at as a weak time for horror movies. But there's actually a lot of great stuff that came out, which I'll show you along the way in this episode. So, one of the most underrated decades, in my opinion, the 1990s. Let's get straight into it. So we start, of course, in 1990, and it was a great year. I know they often say that the early 90s was just an extension of the 1980s, and lots of fun things coming out in this year. You've got Arachnophobia. Now, for a long time, this was my number one pick. On early drafts of this decade, I had it as my number one, but I did go for something else. But Arachnophobia is a really good one. It's one that I've liked since I was a little kid. It's probably one of the first scary movies that I ever saw. You've also got Gremlins 2, really good sequel where they go crazy in the TV studio. They seem to just utilise all different kinds of situations and scenarios in that one. Misery, one of the most effective and disturbing Stephen King adaptations. Great performance by Kathy Bates in that one. Nightbreed, which is a movie you should watch if you just want to see a totally awesome monster movie. Check out Nightbreed. It's a really good one. It's got a good story behind it, and there's just lots of examples of really good practical monster makeup. And Tremors, the awesome giant killer worm movie out there in the desert. But the movie that I'm going to go for 1990 is the remake of Night of the Living Dead. Now, I love the original movie. It's an iconic film, brilliantly made, changed the landscape of horror. But I think if it comes down to it, I probably like the remake slightly better. I think this is a masterclass in remaking films. It doesn't try to outdo it. It's respectful to the original, and I feel it just improves on it in a few different ways. It kind of takes the old movie and just spruces it up with colour, more gore, better zombie effects, and just some general makeup effects from Tom Savini. And it works really well. It's a really nice kind of updated companion piece to the original. They do change the ending a little bit. They took liberties with that, and I think that could have upset a few people. But the ending of the original was so kind of iconic and hard-hitting. And in the same vein, I don't know how fruitful it would have been to just copy that. So they do change it a little bit, albeit it's still quite downbeat. But I think just overall, Tom Savini did a great job with this movie, and it complements and improves on the original just a little bit more. So this is my pick for 1990. On to 1991. And for this one, you've got Alligator 2, which was a pretty good sequel in a trashy popcorn horror kind of way. Steve Railsback and Richard Lynch were in that one. You've got Body Parts, which is a good one where this guy loses his arm in a car accident and he gets another one stitched on, but it's evil and starts doing crazy things. It's literally a film about horror hands. Cape Fear, the awesome Robert De Niro as Max Cady, terrorising Nick Nolte's family on the riverboat. The People Under the Stairs, not personally my favourite Wes Craven movie, but I know that is a popular one. And Silence of the Lambs, which is one of the most successful horror movies, winning the Oscar for Best Picture. An amazing performance from Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster. Very strong contender. Just me personally, I go for more of the trashier things rather than the psychological horror stuff, if I'm honest. So the movie that I'm going to go for, and it's one that's very much off the beaten track. It's a rather obscure one that I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about. But the movie I'm going to go for 1991 is Strays, which is a killer cat movie. This doctor moves his family into a quiet rural town, sort of on the eve of all these cats rising up and going crazy and killing people. It's very, very similar. I don't mean this in a bad way. It's very, very similar to Arachnophobia. It's almost the same movie. Same story with like a doctor coming into town and these animals in question inexplicably killing people and him having to deal with it. It could also almost be shot in the same town. The locations look identical to Arachnophobia. So very, very similar film. If you like Arachnophobia, definitely check out Strays. But yeah, it's one that's really obscure. Now it has had a Blu-ray release from Scream Factory, so it has a major release. But despite that, I don't remember hearing anyone talk about this one. But it's one that I really enjoy and one that I think deserves a little bit of coverage, and it's going to be my pick for 1991. On to 1992, and for this year you've got Army of Darkness, which is not the strongest one in the Evil Dead franchise, but I did like the medieval setting, and it's got a number of creative set pieces. Candyman, now I imagine this one might be a lot of people's number one pick for that year. Candyman is a fantastic movie. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I know it's one that I was really impressed with. Dr. Giggles, which is a really, really fun movie with Larry Drake as this psychotic doctor terrorising this quiet little town. Really enjoyable film. I do like Dr. Giggles. And Hellraiser 3, really enjoy that one. That was kind of the one where the production changed from a British production to an American one. And you can tell, it's a very fun movie. Not quite as dark as the other two, but I really like this one and like the nightclub setting and things like that. So, all good movies there. But the one I'm going to go for, had to go with this one really, and that is Dead Alive, aka Brain Dead. So, Peter Jackson's gore-filled epic with Lionel trying to do battle against the zombies after his mum gets bitten by the Syrian rat monkey and starts turning everyone into the foul flesh-eating creatures. But yeah, I've told this story before, but I remember when my dad tracked down Brain Dead on video and we both watched it upon its release, and it blew both of us away. I don't think either of us had ever seen anything quite as violent and gory yet as funny at the same time. And that's one of the things I really like about Brain Dead. It is unbelievably gory, but it does it in such a fun, comical way. It's a really good balance that it manages to strike up, so that it does deliver on the blood and guts, but it's not horrifying. It's not an endurance test. You can really pop the popcorn and have a good time watching this one. And the effects and the zombie creatures and all the blood and guts look amazing. They really go to town on this movie, making it so effective. So yeah, my pick for 1992 definitely had to be Brain Dead, aka Dead Alive. On to 1993, some really solid releases coming out in this year. You've got Body Bags, fantastic anthology, directed by Toby Hooper and presented by John Carpenter. You've got Kronos, which is a wonderful Guillermo del Toro vampire fable. Hard to explain, but one that you should definitely check out. Leprechaun, Jennifer Aniston hates it, but I love Leprechaun. Man's Best Friend, which is a fantastic, not quite killer dog movie. It's a dog that's been engineered, and it all turns a bit sinister, but really, really good film. And Return of the Living Dead 3, which is actually my favourite of that whole franchise. I love the zombie woman and some of the zombie effects in that one. But for 1993, I'm going to go with Ticks. So I love my killer bug movies anyway, and Ticks is one of the best. So a bunch of troubled teens, They spend some time in this sort of this camp in the woods, but they get attacked by mutated giant tick monsters, and it's a great film and full of gory, gooey mayhem. And Ticks is one that it's just, I think it's a really good film. It does some things very well. It's incredibly cheesy in places, but the effects in it are top notch. Some of the acting's really good. The kids in it are very likeable. I think it's a film that's easy to kind of sweep it aside because it's called Ticks, but there is a lot of merit in this film, and it's a really enjoyable one. And you know, when I was looking over the movies from this particular year, Ticks was the one that stood out as the movie that I enjoy the most. So my pick for 1993 is Ticks. On to 1994. Now, some close contenders for this were In the Mouth of Madness. Now, personally, I don't think John Carpenter was at his best in the 90s, but In the Mouth of Madness was a really good film from him. The Stand, the episodic adaptation of Stephen King's epic book, I thought it was pretty good. And New Nightmare, which is one of the Nightmare on Elm Street sequels that I really like. It's the one that kind of turns itself on itself and becomes very meta and acts as if Freddy Krueger is really going after the original cast, which was a fantastic idea for a movie. But the one that I'm going to go for 1994 is Interview with a Vampire. So one that I wasn't a fan of when I first watched it. Didn't like this one at all. Didn't like its style. I was a bit young at the time, and I think it was wasted on me. Upon rewatches and now that I'm older, I think it's one of the most beautiful and elegant horror films ever made. It really kind of elevates itself in terms of the quality and the lush production and just the grand scale of this movie. I like how it transcends over such a long time and explores different ages and periods through time. It's great to see the likes of Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, kind of big Hollywood names, doing something a little bit different. I wish they both have made more horror movies, but they do a great job in this one, and it's just a really good one if you want to step up the horror genre a little bit and watch something a bit more lavish. It's a very, very wonderful, beautiful film. So this is my pick for 1994. On to 1995, which seems to be the year for quite a few cheesy horror movies. Great films, but a little bit more on the cheesy side. But first up, you've got Frostbiter, which is a really good film. It's kind of like Evil Dead. Demons in a cabin, but it's all in like a wintry setting. Not one that many people mention, but one that's definitely worth checking out. Ice Cream Man, with Clint Howard as the unhinged titular character. Very fun film. I've always liked Ice Cream Man. Jacko, which is a really good one of this sort of jack-o'-lantern figure going around killing people on Halloween. It's a great one to watch during that time. Leprechaun 3, which is probably my favourite one of the franchise. I absolutely love this movie. The leprechaun goes to Las Vegas and it's hilarious. Species, so pretty good one with the alien woman trying to take over people. And Tales from the Hood, which is only one that I saw a couple of years ago and I couldn't believe I put it off for so long. Tales from the Hood is a really good anthology movie. But the film that I want to go for 1995, and this is one that I watched when I was a kid and really liked it, is Demon Knight, the Tales from the Crypt movie. So this one, you've got a bunch of people that hold up inside this big house, being led by William Sadler, and they're trying to fend off a bunch of demons who are being led by Billy Zane, who plays a very charismatic and almost likable role for someone that's on the side of evil. But it's really good, very fun, some really good demon effects in this one, and yeah, just one that I've always enjoyed and found very entertaining. I'm a big fan of Tales from the Crypt anyway, and I do like the movies that they make as well. and Demon Knight is probably my favourite and the one that I've got a lot of nostalgia for. So my pick for 1995 is Demon Knight. Right, on to 1996, some seriously good films in this year. This one was a hard one to pick from. But first up, you've got The Craft, which is a really good movie of the high school girls getting into witchcraft. The Frighteners, with Michael J. Fox getting into the ghost busting business. Really fun film. From Dusk Till Dawn, absolutely love that movie. I love the change in tone from sort of going from the crime road movie to suddenly all these vampires jumping out and having a vampire shoot off in the bar. It's such a cool film. And Scream, which was very close to being my number one pick. I know this kind of reinvented horror and the slasher genre, and it is a really, really good movie. But the film that I'm going to go for, and again, it's just a bit more of a favourite of mine, and one that I really, really love, and not a lot of people seem to go for actually, but it's Bad Moon. One of the most underrated werewolf movies, in my opinion. I really enjoy this one. I think it's got a great story. So it's this woman, and I think it might be her uncle or a brother or some member of the family comes back to town after being gone for a long time, and is living on the outskirts in a trailer, but he's a werewolf and is killing off members of the town in his werewolf ways. And what I like about this movie is the first character, the only character really to find out about the werewolf is the family dog, which is this beautiful German Shepherd dog. And as a German Shepherd person, I really like that, and it's a great dynamic how kind of the dog and the kid end up working together to stop the werewolf. So yeah, it's always one that I've enjoyed from the 90s. Doesn't get a lot of love. I know a lot of people don't like this one or don't think it's all that great, but I always thought this was a really good film and deserved a bit more love. So my pick for 1996 is Bad Moon. On to 1997, and I think this year had the most mentionable contenders for the number one spot. A lot of good movies came out in this year. And what's kind of cool about 97 onwards is, for me personally, I can really start to remember that time. Like, I've got more vivid memories of these movies coming out and learning about them at a young age and remembering them coming out in the video shop, that kind of thing. So for 1997, you've got Alien Resurrection, which I really enjoyed. I wasn't too hot on Alien 3, but I did like Alien Resurrection and some of the things that they did with that movie. Anaconda, I like it for what it is. I think it's a fun creature feature. The Devil's Advocate, which is worth a watch if you want more of like a thinking man's courtroom-based horror film. Event Horizon, which is not one that I go mad for, but I do recognise how good of a film it is, and I love the plot of like that hellish dimension in space. I Know What You Did Last Summer. That's a slasher movie that I really enjoy. One of my favourites of the post-Scream cycle. The Night Flyer, which is one that I only recently watched and reviewed, but I liked it that much. I definitely wanted to give it a mention for this year. The Relic, which is a great creature feature. It takes place in a museum, if I remember right. It's been a long time since I've seen The Relic, but I do remember loving it. And Wishmaster, which was a really close contender. I do love that movie. Wishmaster's almost like an excuse just to cram in as many awesome practical effects as you can into one movie. So, all great films. Now, the film that I've gone for, it is a bit of a silly one, but it's very good at what it does, and it's one that I've always loved. And the movie in question is Jack Frost, the killer snowman movie. So, yeah, I remember this one coming out. I was immediately intrigued by the concept of a killer snowman, and it didn't disappoint. It was a fun film. It didn't take itself too seriously, which I think is a necessity for this movie. And it was silly, but it didn't go overboard. It didn't sink to any dumb levels. I didn't think it kind of. I think it does a good job in what it sets out to do, and the Killer Snowman looks awesome. And yeah, it's always one that I've enjoyed. It's pretty much a staple of mine around Christmas time, so it's got that going for it as well. So yeah, it's just one that always makes me smile and that I have fun watching. So my pick for 1997 is Jack Frost. On to 1998, and again, some seriously good releases in this year. For anyone that says the 90s was terrible for horror films, I got to disagree. So for this year, you've got Blade, really cool vampire movie with Wesley Snipes. Deep Rising, one of the most underrated horror films in my opinion, with Treat Williams and co battling some sea monsters on a luxury cruise ship. The Faculty, another really underrated horror movie with these high schoolers uncovering that their teachers are aliens. Ring, which I think was the first ever sort of J-horror, Japanese horror movie that I ever saw. This was the one that introduced me to that subgenre. Urban Legend, another really good one from the post-Scream cycle. And John Carpenter's Vampires, another good one from John Carpenter there in the 90s. And James Woods was really cool in that one. But again, I'm just edging towards a personal favourite of mine. And again, a movie that I vividly remember being released, which is fun. And that is Halloween H2O. And this has always been a guilty pleasure of mine. It's always been a go-to of mine in the Halloween franchise. And this was really the first Halloween film that felt like it was released during my time, if that makes sense. The other ones were released either when I was a bit too young or before I was born. But Halloween H2O, I remember being around. I remember it coming out. It was quite a big deal. It was in a lot of different places. It was like you'd see it on MTV and things like that. A lot of people were promoting H2O. And it was this big deal. Like it was 20 years later. Michael Myers was back. Jamie Lee Curtis was back. LL Cool J was in it, which seemed like the coolest thing at the time for a kid. And yeah, it was just like it was Halloween, but it had this like new hip twist to it, which I really enjoy. And I still like going back to it now and watching it. It has a lot of nostalgia for me. So my pick for 1998 is Halloween H2O. And on to the final year of the 1990s, 1999. Some absolutely top releases again coming out in this year. You've got the Blair Witch Project, which is a movie that I love. I still have a lot of respect for that film and what they did, and with so little. In terms of found footage now, it's quite tame. Not a lot happens at all, but in a way that makes it even more effective. Deep Blue Sea, it's a guilty pleasure of mine. You know, I can't resist my shark movies. But Deep Blue Sea, I think, is one of the better ones. End of Days, not a great movie, but you've got Schwarzenegger battling the devil and all these apocalyptic forces, which is pretty good. The Haunting remake, I'm going to give it a mention. I do like it, and I mainly like it for the absolutely beautiful set design. The giant set and the house itself in this movie is spectacular. I really feel like they went to town and put a lot of effort into making that house look the way it did. So props to them for that. I'll give it a mention. Idle Hands, which is one of my favourite horror comedies. I can put that on any time and have a laugh with that one. Lake Placid, another one of my my guilty pleasure creature feature movies. Ravenous, which is a really underrated one, exploring kind of cannibalism and things like that in the old pilgrimage times. And Stir of Echoes, really good kind of spooky supernatural one with Kevin Bacon. But the movie that I'm going to go for, and again, I had to go for this one, looked over them all and thought, yes, this one is Sleepy Hollow, which is just a wonderful film. Tim Burton absolutely nails it with that kind of gothic horror feel to it. I've heard a lot of people say it's very Hammer horror-esque, which makes me like the film even more. But in this one, of course, you've got Johnny Depp playing Ichabod Crane in the Legend of Sleepy Hollow story. A story that I really like anyway, and I thought this was just an absolutely wonderful adaptation. And in a time when the 90s was kind of pushing it in terms of kind of being cool and exploring new technology, it was nice to see a kind of an old-fashioned gothic-y tale be released. So my pick for 1999 is Sleepy Hollow. So there we go, guys. That's where we're at for this decade. This is my list for the 1990s. So let me know what you think of that. Let me know if you agree. If not, feel free to let me know what your choices from each year would be. Be really interested to see that. Now, I've got a couple of other videos coming up after this, but then we're going to get straight back on this and we'll be looking at the best movies from the 2000s. And there's some really good releases from that millennial decade, so definitely stick around to see that. So thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for more videos.